When my son said, "Dad, we can't keep doing this," I heard something worse. I heard, "You're getting close to the point where somebody else is going to decide what happens to you." And the worst part was this: I had already given him a reason. I just had not told him the whole reason. I never told my son how long I was on that kitchen floor. I told him I slipped on the ice behind the back steps. That part was true. What I left out was the time. I left out how the light changed in that room. I left out hearing the heat come on. I left out what a man starts thinking when the phone is still too far away and the house is too quiet. I remember thinking I had spent a lifetime being the one people called when something went wrong. Then all at once, I was the thing that had gone wrong. A few days later, my son looked at me and said, "Dad, we can't keep doing this." He meant the driving, the checking in, the worry. I know that. But what I heard was, "You're getting close to the point where somebody else is going to decide what happens to you." I'm not most afraid of falling again. I'm afraid of telling the truth about that floor and having it used to move me out of my own life.
Henry, it sounds like the fear was not only the fall, it was what might happen after you told the truth. Before that morning, what was the thing in that house you still needed to do with your own hands?
Being useful, that's the first word.
Yeah.
I taught shop for 32 years, then came home and kept fixing whatever this place put in front of me. Fence post leaning, hinge loose, tractor acting stubborn. My wife used to say I couldn't pass a bad motor without taking it personally. After she died, I held on harder. Same driveway, same back steps, same coffee mug by the sink. As long as the place still needed me, I did not have to sit with the harder part. Like whether I was lonely, whether I was slowing down, and whether my son had started looking at me and seeing a problem instead of his father.
Henry, when you say being useful, what did that mean in that house, day after day?
It meant there was always something that still belonged to my hands. My wife and I raised our son there, so the house was never just a house to me. It was birthdays, bills, mud by the back door, apologies at the table, an ordinary life that had to keep moving whether anybody felt ready or not. If something went wrong, I was usually the one who answered it. Not because I was a hero, because I was there, because it was mine to do. And truth be told, I liked that arrangement. A man can hide in usefulness for a long time and call it character.
Hide from what?
From softer things, from grief, from fear, from the fact that if the place stopped needing me, I might have to ask whether anybody still did. Some of that was practical. Some of it was me trying not to hear the silence get too comfortable.
Was asking for help always hard for you?
Yes, but I wouldn't have admitted that in polite company. Where I come from, asking for help was supposed to come after you had run out of honest options. Not while you still had two hands, a decent back, and some pride left. You did not call people over because the gate leaned a little. You did not make yourself into an event because winter was winter. You handled what you could. You kept your complaints trimmed. You did not audition for helplessness. That is not always wisdom, by the way. Sometimes it is just vanity with better posture.
And when did that rule start costing you?
Probably before I was willing to count the cost. At first it was small. That's how these things get in. I started taking longer to do ordinary work. I noticed it before I said it out loud. Bringing things in from the truck. Going from the yard back into the kitchen. Standing still a little longer before taking the steps in winter. Catching my breath where I used to keep moving. Nothing dramatic. That is the sneaky part. A man does not usually declare, "I have entered a new era." He just adjusts, then adjusts again, then pretends the adjusting is nothing. If my son asked how I was doing, I gave him what I suppose is the regional answer. "Oh, I'm fine." That sentence has protected a lot of Midwestern men from honesty.
Protected or hidden?
Both. It protected me from sounding fragile. And it hid from him how much calculation had started going into ordinary things. By then I was already measuring tasks in a way I never used to. Not, can I do that? More like, can I do that without anybody noticing what it cost? That is a humiliating way to live, even before anyone humiliates you.
Did your son notice the changes before you said them?
He noticed some of them. He started looking around more when he came by. Not in a greedy way, not like a man taking inventory, more like a man trying to quietly solve a problem before it got worse. That sounds generous, and sometimes it was. But concern has a tone change. You can hear it when it stops standing beside you and starts standing over you. I remember one Sunday after a patch of freezing rain, he came in, stamped his boots, set his gloves down, and before he sat, he looked out toward the back steps. Not casually, carefully. Then he asked how often I was using that door. Now, on paper, that is a fair question. But a question can carry a second question inside it. The one I heard was not, are those steps safe? The one I heard was, how much longer can we let you keep deciding this for yourself? So I made a joke. I said, I use them every time I feel like adding excitement to my day. He did not laugh. That is how I knew the conversation had moved somewhere I did not like.
What had it moved into?
Management. Not fully, not openly, but enough for me to feel it. He would say things like, you don't have to prove anything to me, Dad. That sounds kind. But it also tells you the other person has already decided you are still trying to prove something. He would say, you should have called me. Again, fair sentence. Loving sentence, even. But say that sentence enough times to a man who has built his life around handling his own day, and it starts sounding less like love and more like a quiet transfer of authority. He'd offer to take care of this, handle that, come by and do the other thing. And the words themselves were not cruel. That is part of what made it hard. If someone is practical, worried, loving, and slowly beginning to plan around you, you can lose your ground in very polite language.
Did you trust his heart and still fear where his thinking was going?
That's exactly it. I do not believe my son woke up one morning and thought, how do I take over my father's life? I think he got scared. Scared people like plans, scared people like categories, scared people like words such as safer, easier, better, practical. And an old man who still says no can feel very inconvenient to a good plan. That is where the hurt lies. Not in whether he loved me, but in whether love had started to picture me mainly as a problem to manage.
Was there a point where you felt the house itself had changed meaning?
Yes, for years the place told me who I was.
Yeah.
It told me I was still in charge of my own day.
Yeah.
It told me I still knew where things went and how things worked. Then, slowly, the same place began turning into evidence. A slick patch by the steps was no longer weather. A missed call was no longer a missed call. A longer pause at the railing was no longer just age. It was proof. That is hard to explain to someone younger. You start feeling like every ordinary weakness is being quietly added up. Maybe no one means it that way, but when you are the one growing older inside the evidence, that is how it can feel.
And did that make you tell less or more?
Less, much less. I did not lie exactly. I edited. There is a difference, but not one I am proud of. I would leave out how winded I got. I would leave out which chores I had started postponing. I would leave out how often I stood at the bottom of the steps and thought about them before taking them. I would leave out that some evenings the phone felt farther away than it had any right to. Once you start trimming the truth, it becomes a habit faster than you think. You tell yourself you are protecting your son from worry. Then you realize you are also protecting yourself from what worry might authorize.
What do you mean by that?
Worry opens doors. First, it opens the door to advice, then to repeated advice, then to suggestions, then to planning, then to phrases like, we should think ahead, then to, this might be too much for one person, then to, we can't keep doing this. By the time a sentence like that arrives, it usually has a long hallway behind it. That hallway had already been built.
So that morning on the floor did not create the fear. It exposed it.
Yes, that morning did not invent anything. It brought everything to a point. By then, I had already been living in a quiet argument between what I could still do, what I could still almost do, and what I could no longer afford to admit. And that is a tiring argument, because pride does not like paperwork. Pride does not like lists. Pride does not like witnesses. Pride especially does not like sons who are beginning to ask reasonable questions. But the body is not sentimental. It keeps its own records.
Before we go to that morning, What had become hardest to admit to yourself?
Not that I was slowing down. A man can admit that much and still keep his dignity. The hardest part was admitting that one honest account of my limits might become the opening bid in a negotiation about whether I still got to stay where my life had happened. That was the part I could not stand, not the help, the bargain hidden inside the help. And by the time I stepped out onto that ice, I had already been carrying more of that fear than I ever let my son see. That is the truth. And it did not begin on the kitchen floor.
Can you take me back to that morning?
Yes, it was early, still gray, one of those winter mornings where the light has not fully made up its mind yet. The kitchen was warm enough, the kind of ordinary warm you do not notice until you lose it. I remember standing by the back door and looking out, and nothing about it struck me as dramatic. Dangerous things rarely announce themselves with any dignity. They just sit there and wait for you to keep believing the day is ordinary. Those steps were not new to me. I had gone in and out that way for years. In summer, in rain, in snow. In all the small weather, a person stops respecting because he has survived it too many times. I opened the door, stepped out, and my foot went before the rest of me had agreed to it. It was quick, quicker than fear. One moment I was standing there, and the next I was down hard enough to lose my breath, and old enough to know that losing your breath on cold concrete is not something you argue with. At first I was not frightened. At first I was irritated. That probably sounds foolish, but irritation comes cheap to men like me. Fear takes a minute. Pride tries to get there first. So I did what I suppose I had always done. I tried to stand up as if the matter could still be handled privately. I reached for the railing. My hand got it. My legs did not cooperate. I tried again. That is the part people do not always understand. A fall is not only the moment you go down. A fall is all the small negotiations after that. What will answer when you ask your body for something simple? What will not? How many times you pretend the next try is going to be the one that restores the old arrangement? I got nowhere. And then the cold began to get my attention properly. Not all at once. Just enough to tell me I could not stay where I was. So I turned and worked my way back inside. There is nothing graceful about crawling back into your own house. That was when the embarrassment came in. Not because anyone saw me, no one did, but because I saw me. The back door was still open behind me. Cold air coming in. One knee, then a hand, then the other knee, then stopping to catch my breath, then moving again. By the time I got onto the kitchen floor, I had made it to safety in the technical sense, but not in any way that felt like safety.
Were you hurt badly?
Not in the way that makes a clean story. Nothing snapped, nothing dramatic. I was sore, shaken, and more winded than I wanted to admit. My hip was angry. My shoulder was no happier than I was. But the real problem was that I still could not get myself up. And the phone was on the counter. Not far, exactly. Just far enough to become insulting. When you are upright, a counter is nothing. A simple domestic fact. When you are flat on a kitchen floor, it might as well be in another county. I lay there a while telling myself I only needed a minute. That is another thing men do. We reduce the truth in installments, then maybe a few more. Then, before long, you are no longer deciding anything. You are measuring the room. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember the heat coming on. I remember looking at the light on the lower cabinets and realizing it had shifted. That may be the worst honest detail. Not the pain, not the cold, the light moving. It gives time a body.
Did you know then that it was worse than you would ever tell him?
Not all at once. But I knew I was crossing into something I did not want attached to my name. That house had held every version of me I could still bear to recognize. Husband, father, teacher, fixer, man who could answer the day before the day answered him back. And there I was on the kitchen floor, looking up at a counter and understanding something I did not yet have the courage to say plainly. If I told this story exactly as it happened, it would not stay a story about ice. It would become evidence. Evidence that I was not as steady as I claimed. Evidence that the house was becoming too much. Evidence that the questions had a right to get louder. I was not ready for that. So before I ever reached the phone, I think I had already decided I was going to leave something out. That is not a noble thing to admit. But it is true. I spent the next stretch of time trying to get enough leverage to pull myself up. I got one hand to a chair leg. That helped some. Then I slid, tried again, rested, swore once, quietly, because there was no point making a scene for an audience of one. Then I got a little higher. Then not. Then higher again. You do not feel old all at once. Sometimes you feel old in installments, right there on your own linoleum. Eventually, I got enough of myself upright to reach the phone. By then, my breathing sounded wrong to me. Not hospital wrong, just unfamiliar enough to make me angry. I called my son. He answered quickly. And the first thing in his voice was concern, real concern. I want to be fair about that. I have never said he did not care. He asked what happened. I told him I slipped on the ice behind the back steps. That was true. He asked if I was inside. I said yes, that was true. He asked if I was all right. And that is where truth started getting trimmed. I said, I'm banged up a little, but I'm okay now. I did not tell him I had crawled. I did not tell him I had been on that floor long enough to know the shape of the morning by sound. I did not tell him how hard it had been to get to the phone. And I absolutely did not tell him how long I had stayed there before I could get enough of myself up to make the call. He said he was coming over. I told him not to rush. That was pride talking again. Pride, and maybe one last wish to arrange my face before another man, even my own son, came through that door and saw what the morning had made of me. When he got there, he looked at me carefully, not loudly, not harshly, carefully. That was almost harder. He kept asking practical questions. Did I hit my head? Was I dizzy? Had I blacked out? Should we have somebody check me out? And I answered like a man trying to keep a wall standing with one hand behind his back. No, I'm fine. No need to make more of it than it was. He looked toward the back door, then at the floor, then at me again. I could feel him adding things up, maybe not the whole thing, but enough. And sitting there in my own kitchen, sore, tired, and annoyed at myself for how relieved I was that another human being had walked into the room, I knew two things at once. I knew I was not going to be able to keep pretending nothing had changed. And I knew I was going to fight like hell not to let that change be used as the beginning of my removal. That is why, when he later said, "Dad, we can't keep doing this," it landed where it landed. Because by then the worst part was already hidden. Not the fall, the time. And once you hide time from the people who love you, you are no longer just hiding an incident. You are hiding what that incident might allow them to do.
Henry, when you say the worst part was not the fall, what was it?
It was the bargain hidden inside the help. That is still the plainest way I know to say it. If I told the whole story, I was afraid the story would stop belonging to me. It would become discussion, then planning, then recommendation, then that careful tone in a room where everyone sounds reasonable except the person whose life is actually under review.
So the fear was not only, will I fall again? It was, will I still get to be the one asked?
Yes. At my age, people get very interested in safety. I understand that. I am interested in it too. I do not have some romantic attachment to broken hips. But safety is a funny word. Sometimes it means care. Sometimes it means control with good manners. If my son said, "I'm worried about you," I heard, "You are becoming a problem set." If he said, "We need to think ahead," I heard, "We are getting ready to think past you." Now that is not always a fair translation. But fear does not wait for fairness before it starts translating.
When did you realize you were not only hiding the fall from him, but hiding from what the truth might let him do?
Probably when I heard myself leaving things out and felt relieved by it. That relief told on me. If leaving out the time made me feel safer, then I was not only protecting him from worry, I was protecting my place, my say, my right to still be a full adult inside my own life. And once I saw that, I had to admit something I did not enjoy admitting. Silence had not kept the peace. It had made me easier to plan around. I had spent a good part of my life confusing quiet with steadiness. You tell yourself you are being decent. You tell yourself you are not making trouble. And maybe some of that is true. But if your quiet keeps teaching everyone that you do not need to be asked, one day you realize your own silence has been helping build the very thing you are afraid of.
What did that morning tell you had to change?
That I needed to stop acting as if the only choices were these. Tell the whole truth and lose the house, or tell half the truth and keep my pride. That is not a real choice. That was a scared man choosing between two bad guesses. What had to change was the frame. I did not need to hand over my authority in order to admit a limit. I needed words strong enough to separate those two things.
Had anyone ever given you that distinction before?
No, not in words I could use. Most people mean well, but they are either too soft or too fast. Too soft sounds like, oh, Henry, everybody needs help. That does not help me much. Too fast sounds like, all right, here's what we're going to do. That helps even less. What I needed was something firmer than comfort and slower than takeover. I needed a way to say, yes, there are things I cannot safely do. No, that does not mean I have become a child. Yes, I need support. No, support does not get to swallow the rest of my life.
What stays yours?
The house, for now, unless I say otherwise. My mornings, my keys, my papers, my right to be spoken to directly, and not about as though I have stepped out of the room. And my right to decide what help I will accept before someone else starts treating help like a door they have already opened.
Did you know that clearly then?
I felt it then. I can say it clearly now. Back then it was more like a knot. Now it is closer to a sentence. And a sentence like that helps. You can take it into a room with you. That is what I finally understood. I did not need to win an argument with my son. I needed to enter the conversation with something sturdier than hurt. Because hurt, on its own, makes a poor brief. If I only said, don't do this to me, we would both end up in emotion and no structure. He would get more worried. I would get more defensive. Then we would be two scared men talking past each other across a kitchen table.
So what was sturdier than hurt?
Specificity. I can still do this. I cannot safely do that. I will accept help here. I am not handing over decisions there. It may not sound dramatic, but it helps. It keeps fear from taking the whole meeting.
Was that the beginning of your list?
Yes. Not right away in neat handwriting, unfortunately. It started uglier than that. I had a yellow pad on the table. I drew a line down the middle, almost the way I used to show students how to lay out a decision before cutting into good wood. On one side, I wrote what I can still do, on the other, what I can't do safely. Then I sat there longer than I care to admit, because once you write the second heading, you have to stop performing for yourself. That is a rude moment. The icy back steps went on the wrong side. Carrying heavy feed bags went on the wrong side. Going out in bad weather without telling anyone went on the wrong side too, and I did not enjoy writing that one. On the first side, I put what was still true. I can cook. I can keep the books straight. I can manage my medicine. I can drive in town when I'm steady. I can decide who comes into my house. I can tell you if something feels wrong. Then I added two more headings. What help I will accept, and what decisions stay mine. That last one was the hardest to write because it forced me to stop speaking in feelings and start speaking in terms another person could not honestly pretend to misunderstand. What decisions stay mine? That is clean language. You can disagree with it, you can worry about it, you can argue around it, but you cannot say you do not know what I mean.
What went under that heading?
Whether I stay in that house, whether I use the back door after ice unless we change something about it. Who comes with me to appointments, if anyone? What gets discussed with doctors in front of me rather than around me? And one more thing I am a little proud of now, though I did not enjoy writing it then. If you are worried, ask me directly. Do not hold a family meeting about me before speaking to me first.
That sounds like you.
It did, which helped. When my son came back, I told him there was something I had not told him fully. His face changed right away. That concern was back. And I said, I'm going to tell you the whole thing, but before I do, I want you to hear it from me, and I want you to look at this list before either one of us decides what it means. He took the yellow pad and sat with it longer than I expected. He read one side, then the other. He went back up to the top. I watched his fingers stop on the line about the back steps, then on the line about what decisions stayed mine. He looked up at me and did something very small that mattered a great deal. He did not start persuading. He did not start building a plan out loud. He asked, all right, what part do you want me to help with first? That may not sound like much. To me it was, because it was a question, not a plan, not a verdict, a question. And I said, start with the steps. Leave the rest of my life where it is for the moment. He nodded and said, all right, steps first. Then he asked if I wanted him to sit a minute before we talked about anything else. I remember that because it had not occurred to me that I was allowed to need that too. That was the first time since the fall that the room felt shaped by both of us. Not solved, shaped.
What did that change for you?
It made honesty feel less like surrender. Not easy, just possible. I also had to admit something else I did not enjoy admitting. If I want to stay in the room as a decision maker, I cannot make my own condition impossible to understand, and then call everybody disrespectful for being alarmed. Respect goes both ways there. I do not owe anyone a performance of helplessness, but I also do not get to demand trust while editing every relevant fact. That was humbling. Necessary, but humbling.
So what changed after that conversation?
A few practical things, and that matters more than people think. He stopped treating every concern like a referendum on whether I could live there. We talked about the steps as a steps problem, not as proof that my whole life needed to be packed into boxes. That difference lowered the temperature of almost every conversation after it. I agreed to a fall risk assessment. That phrase would have offended me 6 months earlier. It sounded like paperwork for decline. This time, I heard it as a tool. I could live with a tool. And I told him, plain as I could, I will accept help that helps me stay myself. I will not accept help that begins by assuming I am already disappearing. That was the first sentence I said to him that sounded fully like me again.
How did it feel to hear yourself say that?
Not triumphant, just steadier. At this age, I am not looking for cinematic victories. I am looking for sentences I can still live inside. That was one of them.
When you sit in that house now, what feels different?
The temperature in the room. That is the simplest answer, not the actual temperature. Iowa still does what Iowa does. I mean the human temperature. My son still worries. I still get stubborn in ways that are not especially noble. So I do not want to make this sound prettier than it is. But the room changed. He asks more now. That sounds small until you have lived without it. He asks before deciding what a problem means. He asks before turning concern into a plan. And I answer more honestly before my pride gets there first and starts editing. That has helped us more than any speech would have.
Can you feel that in an ordinary moment now?
Yes, a week or so after all that, there was another cold morning. Not a dramatic one, just the kind that used to make me defensive before anybody even spoke. He called and said, "How are the steps today?" He laughed, then said, "Front door today?" And I said, "Front door today." That was all. No fight, no hidden argument. Now, 6 months earlier, I would have heard accusation in that question. This time I said, no performance from me, no takeover from him, just two men finally talking about a real thing as the size it actually was. That was not a grand reconciliation, but it was a better morning.
What changed in the house itself?
A few practical things. The steps got addressed like steps, which was a relief. They stopped standing there pretending to be a referendum on my entire life. I keep sand where I can reach it. The rail got checked. The phone stays closer. That last one offended my vanity for about half a day. Then I decided vanity would recover. I also use the front door more when the weather turns bad, which is not the thrilling defeat I once imagined it would be. It turns out using the safer door is not the same thing as surrendering the deed.
And the list?
The list is still there. Folded, unfolded, added to, argued with. That is probably the most honest thing I can tell you. A list like that is not a one-time act of wisdom. It is a living document for a life that is still changing. What I can still do, what I cannot safely do, what help I will accept, what decisions stay mine. Some days I look at it and think, well, there we are. Other days I look at it and feel annoyed all over again. But annoyance is not the worst thing in the world. Annoyance is still a form of being present. It beats pretending.
Did the list change anything outside the house?
Yes, at the fall risk assessment, the nurse asked a question while looking at my son. He did something then that I noticed right away. He said, "You should ask him. He made the list." That may sound like a very small courtesy. It did not feel small to me, because for a while I had been bracing myself for the part of old age where a room starts tilting away from your name and toward your file. That little sentence tilted it back. Then when they asked what kind of help I had at home, I answered for myself. And when there was something I did want him to add, I said so. Afterward, out in the parking lot, he did something else I noticed. He did not start summarizing me back to myself. He did not say, "See? This proves what I've been saying." He just stood there with the papers in his hand and asked, "Do you want to go straight home, or do you want to get some coffee first?" That question should not have moved me as much as it did. But it did, because it was another small way of saying the day was still mine too. So we got coffee, we talked some about the assessment, some about the weather, and some about absolutely nothing important. It was ordinary, and after a season of feeling like every hard truth would immediately be turned into a plan for my removal, ordinary felt almost luxurious. That is more or less all I ever wanted, not to do everything alone forever, just to remain present inside the telling of my own life.
Do you feel less alone now?
Yes, but not because the fear vanished.
Yeah.
I feel less alone because the fear is no longer doing all the talking. That is different. Before, fear translated everything. A question became a threat. Concern became management. Love became a plan I was not invited into. Now there is a little more room between what is said and what I immediately imagine it means. That room matters. A man can breathe in that room. A man can stay himself in that room.
What do you understand now about your son that you could not understand on that kitchen floor?
That he was scared too. I knew that in theory before. I know it better now. Fear had not only gotten into me, it had gotten into him. He was looking at a father who had always been the one you called when something jammed or sagged or broke. And all at once, the facts were beginning to reverse themselves. I do not think he knew how to hold that gently, so he reached for practicality. That is what many of us do when love gets frightened. We start organizing. It does not always feel good on the receiving end, but understanding that helped me hear him with a little more mercy. Mercy does not erase boundary, but it does keep boundary from turning bitter. And I did not want to become bitter in that house. I have already buried too much there to hand the place over to bitterness too.
What do you feel when you look around that kitchen now?
Mostly gratitude, if I am being fair, a quieter kind than people usually mean by that word. Not gratitude because everything turned out tidy. Not gratitude because aging suddenly became noble or easy. Just gratitude that I can still sit at that table as myself. That matters more than I knew how to say before. Same mug by the sink. Same light in the morning when it decides to come in. Same floor, which I respect more now than I used to. And still my life, maybe altered, maybe needing more honesty than it used to, but still mine.
What would you want the person listening, the one who is afraid that one true sentence might cost them everything, to hold on to tonight?
Do not give fear the whole dictionary. If you are frightened, say you are frightened. If you need help, say where. If something is no longer safe, say that too. But do not hand over the language of your own life before anyone has even asked you a full question. Because needing support does change a life. But it does not have to erase the person who has lived it. Useful, maybe. At this point in my life, useful is still a very comforting word. I am not trying to win against age. I am trying to live with enough honesty that the people around me can help me without talking me out of my own name. And for now, in that house, at that table, with the phone a little closer and the truth a little less edited than it used to be, that feels like enough.